fucking do what you're gonna do. Daughter.
What if the most important moment in Kanan's entire story wasn't a murder, a drug deal, or a war in the streets? What if it was simply a conversation between a mother and her son? Because that's what makes the Season 5 finale of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, so interesting. This episode doesn't try to end Kanan's story with some huge showdown where everybody pulls out a gun and settles their problems. Instead, it slows everything down and gives us something much more personal. Kanan finally has to face what he's become. RAQ finally has to face what she did to her son. And Jukebox has to decide what kind of person she's going to be after losing Marvin. And believe me, that decision changes everything. The strange thing about this finale is that, on the surface, not that much happens compared with some of the crazier episodes we've seen this season. But underneath all of it, the show is basically explaining how these characters became the people we eventually meet in the original Power. And once you look at it that way, the ending becomes much harder to ignore. Let's start with Kanan. For most of Season 5, Kanan has been moving to the story like somebody who has already shut off a part of himself. He's made brutal decisions. He's crossed lines that would have been unthinkable for the younger version of him. And he rarely seems interested in looking back. That's what makes this episode different. For the first time in a while, Kanan actually has to sit with what he's done. He's killed people in his own family. He's helped create situations that have destroyed relationships. And now there's something much bigger hanging over him. RAQ could be next. That possibility finally gets through to him. And this is where the episode gives us one of Kanan's most human moments. He isn't suddenly innocent. He's not asking everyone to forgive him. He isn't pretending that the things he's done never happened. He's simply admitting that he's not ready to lose his mother. That matters. Because for all the anger between Kanan and RAQ, there is still a connection between them that neither one has completely destroyed. That's something the series has been building toward for years. RAQ and Kanan have hurt each other repeatedly, but neither one has ever completely stopped caring about the other. Their relationship is complicated because love and damage exist at the same time. And that's exactly what we see when they finally come face to face. The conversation between them is probably the emotional center of the entire finale. There is no big speech about fixing the family. There is no promise that everything will suddenly be okay. Instead, they finally stop pretending. Kanan knows RAQ has made mistakes. RAQ knows she has failed him in ways she can't simply undo. And for a few minutes, neither one is trying to win. They're just talking. That's what makes the scene work. We've watched these two characters manipulate each other, lie to each other, protect each other, and destroy each other's trust for years. But here, there's simply a mother and son who know they've lost something they may never get back. And honestly, that's probably the closest they've come to understanding each other. But there's a huge problem. While Kanan and RAQ are having this emotional moment, another part of the family is preparing to make a completely different decision. Jukebox. And this is where the finale becomes heartbreaking. Marvin's death changed Jukebox. It wasn't just another loss. Marvin was one of the last people she genuinely loved and trusted. Once he was gone, there wasn't much left holding her together. And the show has been slowly showing us how that grief pushes her toward the colder version of Jukebox we know from Power. That's why her decision in this episode is so important. She wants Kanan to pay for Marvin's death. At first, it seems straightforward. Kanan killed Marvin. Jukebox wants revenge. Simple. But then she sees Kanan and RAQ together. And suddenly, her plan changes. That's the moment that tells us just how far Jukebox has fallen. Instead of simply targeting Kanan, she decides to take away the person she knows matters most to him, his mother. It's cruel. It's personal. And honestly, it's exactly the kind of decision that shows how damaged Jukebox has become. She's no longer thinking about what Marvin would have wanted. She's thinking about what she wants. And that's a huge difference. Because Marvin may have been angry, violent, and deeply flawed, but he was still one of the few people who could pull Jukebox back from the edge. Once he's gone, there is nobody left to do that. And that's why the ending hits so hard. Kanan finally gets the moment he's been avoiding. He gets to be honest with RAQ. He gets to admit that he doesn't want to lose her, but the audience already knows something he doesn't. Jukebox is nearby, and she's already made her choice. That creates one of the most painful ironies in the entire series. Kanan spends the episode realizing that family still matters to him. Jukebox spends the episode deciding that family doesn't matter anymore. They're both shaped by violence. They're both losing pieces of themselves. But they're moving in completely different directions. And eventually those paths collide. Another interesting part of the finale survived. Seeing her pushed into a position where she has to consider options she would normally never entertain is a major change for her. RAQ has always been the person who finds another way. She's the one who walks into the room and makes everyone else nervous. She's the person who believes she can outthink almost anybody. But this time, she's running out of moves. And that is important because RAQ's greatest strength has always been her confidence. When that confidence starts disappearing, the character becomes much more vulnerable. That's also why Kanan's reaction matters so much. For once, he's not thinking about the Empire. He's not thinking about territory. He's not thinking about proving himself. He's thinking about his mother. And maybe that's the biggest tragedy of their entire relationship. Kanan had to lose almost everything before he finally understood what RAQ meant to him. But by the time he understands it, it may already be too late. And then there is the bigger question. How does this finale connect to the Kanan Stark we eventually meet in Power? That's where the episode becomes more than just a season finale. It's an origin story coming full circle. We spent 5 seasons watching Kanan go from a smart kid with a future to someone increasingly comfortable with violence. We've watched the people around him shape him. RAQ shaped him. Marvin shaped him. Lou shaped him. Breeze shaped him. The streets shaped him. And now we're seeing the final pieces fall into place. The tragedy is that Kanan doesn't become dangerous because one person suddenly turns him into a monster. It's gradual. It's a combination of betrayal, grief, ambition, violence, and survival. Every loss takes something from him. Every betrayal teaches him to trust people less. Every violent decision makes the next one easier. By the end, you can finally understand how the adult Kanan was created. And then there's Jukebox. Her journey may be just as important. She loses Marvin. She loses her innocence. She loses whatever remaining connection she had to the idea of family. And instead of healing, she chooses revenge. That's why her final decision is so significant. She's not just hurting Kanan. She's completing her own transformation. The finale essentially tells us that these characters don't simply become who they are. They are pushed there, piece by piece, decision by decision, loss by loss. And that's probably the biggest lesson raising Kanan has given us. Family can be the thing that saves you, but family can also be the thing that destroys you. RAQ spent years trying to protect Kanan, but many of her decisions helped create the very person she feared he would become. Kanan spent years resenting RAQ, but when he finally had to face losing her, he realized the bond was never completely gone. Jukebox lost Marvin and chose revenge instead of healing. And all 3 of them are now carrying wounds that won't simply disappear. That's why I think this finale works best when you don't look at it as a traditional crime drama ending. It's really the end of one chapter in a family tragedy. The battles may continue. The consequences will continue. But these characters have crossed certain lines that cannot be uncrossed. And the most painful part is that, for a brief moment, Kanan and RAQ actually found each other again. They were honest. They were vulnerable. They remembered that underneath everything, the drugs, the violence, the lies, the ambition, they were still mother and son. And then the world they created came crashing back in. That's raising Kanan in a nutshell. People love each other. They hurt each other. They try to protect each other. Then the streets demand a price. And eventually, somebody has to pay it. The Kanan Stark we knew at the beginning of this journey is gone. The question now isn't whether he can go back. It's whether anything of that boy is still left inside him. And judging by where his story ultimately goes, we already know the answer. Very little. But perhaps that's what makes this story so tragic. Kanan wasn't born the man we met in Power. We watched him become that man. And season May 5th have given us the clearest picture yet of exactly how it happened.